Thank you. It's so nice to, well, see all of you. Can you all hear me? Goodness gracious, I can hear me. Okay. I want to tell you a little bit of a love story. And I need to get back behind here. A year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer ago, my son, who couldn't be here tonight because he's off raising money, met a bunch of nerds, guys who tinker for a living. And they're here, we'll introduce them, who had been in this state for many years, working on ideas to change this into that. One of the forms that took was distillation, which if you think about it is a process of turning this into that. You know, you're taking a product and you're making something else out of it. And cannabis, you know, is a business of turning this into that. And as part of that story, started to ponder, what do you do with all the waste that's associated with that particular business, the cannabis business? Now, I'm going to assume that nobody here knows what I'm talking about, has never seen weed, doesn't know anything about it, but just in case, you know, there's a little flower on the top that people are interested in. There's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't have obvious commercial use. And how do you get rid of that in a responsible way? You stick it in the ground, you just light it on fire. And so that question started this process that led to pyrolysis, which we're going to talk a lot about tonight, which is using a thermal process to break that material down, and it turns it into biochar, and there's some other things that are associated with it. So the problem with that business is that if you took all the cannabis that's grown in this country legally in a year, it wouldn't amount to the amount of wood waste that gets generated on a place like Krume, you know, in a good month. I mean, there's just not that much. And so having gotten interested in this idea of taking a waste product and turning it into something that had some value, the question was, well, where in the world would we find an infinite supply of high quality biomass that could be turned into something else? This being the Pacific Northwest, we have a fair bit of that. So I think you all know that on a good year, Washington State ships about 3 billion board feet, mostly softwood lumber, out of this state. 2.8 on the low end, 3.2 on the high end. If that was all 2x4s, that would go back and forth to the moon 4 times. It's just a lot. And I think everybody here knows how this business works. You take a round thing and you turn it into a square thing. There's stuff that's left over. And that stuff, you know, gets called residuals if you're a fancy person, or it's just called waste, or it's called sawdust or end cuts, whatever. There's just a lot of it. Somewhere between 50 and 35% of the milling gets left over. And over the many years that people have been doing this, some of that's been gone into making strand board, some of it's gone into making bedding for horses, some of it's gone into pulp and paper. But as time has gone by, the home for these residuals has diminished. And so now here in this wonderful wood basket, there's a bit of a crisis. You know, what do you do with all that residual product? Pulp and paper has collapsed. The business is, you know, under stress. And so we enter into this discussion with, we have an idea about what to do with that waste product. And so as we started this business, I don't know whether this is providence or just the way the universe wants things to happen. We were looking for a place to put up a test lab where we could just experiment with pyrolyzing waste wood. And we started in Tacoma. I live in Vashon. We have a farm on Vashon, family farm. My son lives in Tacoma. Clayton Turner, who's our chief scientist, lives in Seattle, but also lived in Yelm and Centralia, and basically any place up and down I-5 that's bigger than 42 people, he's lived there. Steve, who's here somewhere, he's our chief biochemist, worked at Weyerhaeuser, knows lots of stuff about trees, lives in Tacoma. Ben's here somewhere. There's Ben right there. He lives in Yelm. We have somebody who lives in Portland. So we started in Tacoma looking for a place where could we put some of our equipment and get about pyrolyzing some Pacific Northwest softwood. Couldn't find anybody in Tacoma that would take us. so that we just kept moving our way south. And until we landed in Chehalis at Richard Pine's place, which is the backyard of Hemphill O'Neill. And so Providence or whatever got us there said, you go here and you start this operation here, because if you do something good's gonna happen. Something good happened, many good things happened. And so the way the hand of fate works, we met the Lewis County development people, economic development people, because they used to be office just up there. And so they opened their arms and said, how can we help? And then we met, Bucks Logging, we met Bucks Lumber, we met Bob Gunther, we met Bob Russell, we met, and then one day Tom Krume, we're going to talk about Tom Krume and Mitch Krume here in a minute, shows up, how he got there, who knows, and said, I have a lumber mill down in Alaska, and we have a failed pyrolysis operation that really needs to go away, but we'd like to talk to you. And so more time goes by, and we now find ourselves standing in front of you in this amazing facility that we're going to talk a little bit more about. Krume Lumber does wonderful things with logs that are too big to get jammed through, one of the big operations that are up there in Morton, and meets Regenerative Industrial. So our vision, our view, has some strands to it. So one of them is, rather than thinking about all that stuff that's left over when you mill a tree, mill a log, mill a piece of timber as waste, how can we turn it into something that has value, economic value? And so what you'll see when we head that way is that we make 3 products. One of them is a hard carbon, which gets called different things. If you mill it loosely, it's called biochar. It's a wonderful agricultural product. So an acre of row crop, an acre of field crop, acre really of anything that you're growing will suck up 10 tons of biochar in a season. It does great things, and we'll talk about that. We also make a tar, we make a vinegar. And the vinegar, which we'll talk about more when we get over there, is this amazing substance. It smells smoky, and it's what's left after a forest burns. So if you've ever seen a forest burn, the next season there's stuff that's growing like crazy there. It wants to get going. And why it wants to get going is because that fire has released keratogens. And those things are germination superchargers. It's an unbelievable substance. When we put it on seeds, it'll take the germination from 21 days to 4 days. It's amazing stuff. We use it in our orchards. You mix it with neem oil, and it's an amazing organic pest suppressant. It's an absolutely amazing chemical. And the people who were here before making a mess, for those of you who know this story, did not know what to do with it. And so for them, it was a waste product. Well, we have a background in distillation. For us, that product is gold. And then there's a tar product that we make. We'll talk more about that. And that tar is an amazing coating. So there's a shipyard up in Canada that's trialing it, about to give us an offtake agreement. It is the most amazing thing, paint on the bottoms of ships, instead of the copper-based stuff that people want to get that off of the ships. If you're in construction and you paint the rebar, on that site, that rebar will never rust. Another product that somebody who was down there previously made such a mess didn't know what to do with. So we'll talk more about what happened with Onalaska Wood Alaska and why we are Onalaska Wood Energy and why we are not them. But the most important part of that story is the things that they thought were waste we think are the most valuable product. And so if we do this right, here on this little mill site here in Onalaska, the only piece of commercially zoned property here in this part of the county, is that we'll turn this into a zero waste lumber mill, where everything leaving here has an economic value to somebody. We're not shipping something away and saying, there goes a waste product. Thank God it's gone. What we want to see is trucks leaving here with, glad to see you, because that just rang the cash register. So this company was funded by my family. So my wife, myself, my son, my daughter, we have almost $500,000 into what's going on down there. And we think, again, in this way that the world wants things to come together, we think it's noteworthy that a family operation, Krume Lumber, meets what is not truly a family operation, but is kind of like it, father, son, coming together to try to do something extraordinary. If we pull this off, if we do this right, without public money, we will create a business that takes in logs, creates board feet of just beautiful product. And when you see the product that Krume makes, if you've never seen it, it's beautiful product. And then all that stuff that's called waste just goes from here to there and gets turned into biochar, which can support our local agricultural businesses, make that soil better, hang on to nutrients longer, even out the hydration cycle. A wood vinegar that we can spray on our apple trees to control pests that we can use to promote germination of the plants that go into the ground. And then that hard carbon can also go into roadways. What makes asphalt black is carbon. And that carbon right now is scraped out of coal furnaces. Comes from China, comes from Russia, comes from India. Some of it comes from the Southeast. It's all petroleum-based or coal-based. Wouldn't it be interesting if instead of that what made those roadways black was carbon, that came from trees that were milled and processed here in Lewis County? Concrete. If you put our carbon into concrete, 1% of the cementous part, so a yard of concrete's 2,000 pounds of cement's about 600 pounds, 1% of that, you sequester a ton of carbon. If you go up to 5%, you're sequestering a huge amount of carbon. You're still at 4,000 pounds per square inch, so that's typical for any type of foundation or roadway. You're sequestering a ton of carbon. You're increasing the cost by a couple of dollars a yard. And now if you're concerned about a LEED score, which if you're building a public building, you have to be, you're going to add 4 to 6 points of LEED. So here's a material that doesn't just make our agriculture more productive, but it's a material that makes the concrete that we stand on better concrete and sequesters a bunch of carbon. It makes better asphalt. It can go into plastic. So black plastic, for those of you farmers, you put a black plastic out on the ground, that black plastic will still be there next year. If you put clear plastic out on the ground, that plastic will not be there next year. It'll start to break down. Why does it break down? It's the black that makes it UV resistant. So we can make a better grade of plastic by putting carbon into it. It makes it more UV resistant, and you reduce the volume of the plastic in the plastic. You can go up to 30% by mass of carbon we can make right here in Lewis County. And then when it goes into a landfill, because it all does, it becomes a carbon sink. But even better, batteries. So what goes into batteries? A lot of carbon goes into batteries for plates and anodes and cathodes and things like that. And some of the most advanced work being done around batteries is in Portland. It's battery central. And there's whole new chemistries being done there. So we're in partnership with a company down there to make carbon here, turn it into graphite here in Lewis County. And now we can make high value, next generation energy storage with carbon that's not dug out of the ground in China, which is where it all comes from right now. You can't buy a carbon plate in this country right now to make a battery because it's all in China. And the graphite that's dug out of the ground that doesn't come from China comes from Russia. These are not our best friends right now. And what's left over comes out of India. And folks are talking about building new graphite mines here in the US, but they won't open for another 10 years. We could be making that high value carbon that goes into these high value energy storage systems here in Lewis County with wood waste that's coming off of this mill or coming off of Morton or coming out of Longview. So that's our vision. If we do this right, we will have jobs, good paying jobs here in Lewis County. We will build an industry. We'll make products that make our world a better world and make everybody a little bit of money.